Marissa was at her usual bus stop one morning when something extraordinary happened. Out of the nearby bushes, a wild black bear appeared and started to approach her. At first, Marissa was really scared, but she quickly noticed the bear wasn't acting mean, feeling curious and surprisingly calm, as if to tell her something. Marissa held her breath and realized that she could very well end up in the hospital after being attacked by this ruthless animal, but for some reason, her fear disappeared and she felt like the bear needed her help. "You're not that vicious though, are you?" she quietly whispered as the bear slowly walked away from her, looking back at her every few steps. Several people saw what was going on and they all yelled to Marissa, "Run! Get away from that animal right now!" Instead, she considered following the bear into the bush. She pushed away some twigs and leaves, and a few steps later, she found herself surrounded by trees. Nobody else was here. It was just her and the bear. She had to admit that it was a little scary, but the animal obviously needed help. The bear slowly continued its walk deeper into the forest, and Marissa followed it, making sure not to trip over a tree root. She thought about it for a moment and decided that she did not have time to call anyone, but she had a plan B. She was going to share her location with her boyfriend, Derek. She quickly texted him, "Sharing location just in case. I'll explain later," and put her phone back in her pocket. The whole time, the bear kept looking back to check whether Marissa was still following it. It was not running, but Marissa did have to make an effort to keep up with it. It was obviously in a hurry, and Marissa couldn't stop wondering what was going on. Marissa noticed that it was getting late. She had just planned on going to the library to do some work, but her plans had obviously changed. She told herself that no matter what the bear wanted, she needed to go home soon, as she did not want to get stuck in the forest at night. Finally, the bear slowed down a bit and started sniffing around. "What is it? What are you looking for?" she asked, looking around the area as well. Suddenly, she heard an odd noise, and it startled her. It was the bear. It was growling. Marissa was suddenly terrified, and she deeply regretted her decision. What was I even thinking? Marissa noticed that the bear was looking at something behind a thick tree. It was just out of her sight. She slowly took a few steps towards the tree, and when she was finally able to see what was behind it, she gasped. Why did the bear lead her here? What did it want from her? She thought it had been asking her for help, but she still did not understand what. You see, the bear had led her to a campsite. There was a tent, and whoever had stayed there had made a campfire the night before. The ashes were still a bit warm. It seemed like the camper had left in a hurry, and Marissa couldn't help but look inside. She saw that there were clothes, supplies, maps scattered all around, and a camera with a half-filled memory card. Who was staying here, and why had they left in such a rush? Something odd was going on here, and she wanted to know what exactly. Among the scattered belongings, Marissa's fingers brushed against the soft, worn leather of a diary. The first pages were filled with neat handwriting detailing the traveler's excitement about his journey into the forest. As Marissa flipped through the pages, she noticed more and more sketches of bears. The entries began highlighting encounters with them, documenting their habits and movements. It was evident that the traveler had developed a profound interest in these magnificent creatures. The traveler's admiration for the bears took a more focused turn. "I've heard tales of a rare white-furred bear cub in this region," he penned. He wished to document this cub, believing it could be the centerpiece of a groundbreaking documentary. Brimming with excitement, the traveler's handwriting almost trembled on the page. "I saw it today, the myth in the flesh. This footage could be my masterpiece. People around the world will know my name, and all the challenges I've faced will pale in comparison to the accolades I'll receive." Then he began to detail intricate tools and traps. "The nets are ready," one read, "and I've set up cameras in all possible locations." Dread filled Marissa as she continued. The traveler's obsession had turned dark. She felt a chill realizing that the traveler was willing to do whatever it took, no matter how unethical, to achieve his dream. Her eyes scanning each entry with renewed urgency, Marissa was searching for any specifics about where the traveler had set his traps or where he'd last seen the young bear. Stories from her childhood crept back into her mind. tales of heartless poachers and traders who saw animals as mere commodities. Reflecting on the bear's actions, everything began to make sense. It wasn't just any bear, it was the cub's mother. Perhaps the mother bear had watched the traveler, sensed his intentions, and had desperately sought an ally in Marissa. The forest was still, but as Marissa attuned herself to its sounds, a distant cry pierced the silence. It was faint, almost drowned by the rustling leaves and chirping crickets, but unmistakably a cry. She began moving in the direction of the sound. With every step, the cries seemed to grow both clearer and more distressed. Suddenly, Marissa stumbled upon a trap. It was empty but freshly set, the metal gleaming ominously. For a moment, her heart sank, fearing the worst. As Marissa and the bear pushed further into the forest, they came upon a clearing where several large cages stood. Without hesitation, Marissa turned on her heels, heading back to the campsite. Every minute counted now, and the pressing weight of the cub's fate pushed her forward. The traveler had mentioned having wire cutters in the tent, essential for setting up traps and hopefully dismantling them too. If there were more cages or snares, those cutters could be the key to freeing the trapped animals, including the bear cub. The feeling of relief was short-lived, however, as a rustling sound outside caught her attention. Emerging from the tent, Marissa's eyes darted around, trying to identify the source of the sound. Someone had been watching, waiting, and Marissa knew she was no longer alone in her mission. It was the traveler from the diary, his face grizzled, an expression one of frustration. Behind him, two others emerged, holding nets and gear. Marissa lunged to the side, using the element of surprise to her advantage. The traveler moved to intercept, but the adult bear, sensing the danger, let out a deep roar, causing a momentary distraction. Seizing the chance, Marissa dashed into the woods, knife in hand, hoping to use the dense underbrush to elude her pursuers. Drawing a deep breath, Marissa chose to focus on the bear. It seemed to have an innate sense of direction, leading her through the safest paths. Pushing through a dense patch of ferns, Marissa stumbled upon a clearing where a heartbreaking scene awaited her. The cub, with its innocent eyes, was trapped in a net, whimpering softly. The sheer desperation, fear, and hope in the bear's eyes resonated with Marissa. They weren't just animals. They were a family fighting for survival. Every tug, every cut brought Marissa closer to the cub. With one last pull, the cub was free. It immediately scampered to its mother, burying its face in her thick fur. Following the bear's lead, Marissa soon found herself walking along a path she hadn't noticed before. The trees began to thin out and the familiar sounds of the world beyond started to filter through. The bears paused, seemingly understanding they had to part ways, but ensuring she was safely guided out. Stepping out of the forest, the sunlight seemed a tad brighter, the air a touch fresher. As she made her way back to her life, Marissa couldn't shake off the overwhelming emotions she felt. Back in the midst of her daily routine, Marissa often found herself lost in memories of her time in the forest. She wore the lessons of trust, unity, and love as a badge of honor, cherishing the incredible bond she had formed with the wilds.